Hello, my name is Barbara. I'm 67 years old and I've spent most of my life expressing myself through embroidery. Every stitch I make feels like a quiet prayer, something that carries pieces of my heart. But a few months ago, something happened that I'll never forget. My daughter-in-law, who works as a professional art designer, looked at my work one afternoon and laughed. "No one wants that old junk," she said. Her words cut deeper than she knew. I smiled politely, but inside I felt small, invisible. That night I stitched until my fingers ached, sewing my hurt into the fabric because I didn't know how else to speak. Weeks passed, and I kept sharing my embroidery online, just little photos on Facebook, nothing special. Then one morning, everything changed. My daughter-in-law's mentor, the most respected designer in the country, saw my post and fell completely in love with my work. When my daughter-in-law found out, she went pale. "Don't you dare talk to her," she whispered, her voice shaking. But I just smiled, tears in my eyes, because I realized something powerful. My hands had spoken for me when my voice couldn't. That moment was only the beginning of a story filled with betrayal, courage, and second chances. What happened next changed not just my life, but my entire family's. You won't believe how far one simple act of faith and one old needle took me. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your messages and learning where everyone is from. Now let's find out how this story really began. I've spent 40 years with a needle between my fingers. Embroidery has always been more than a hobby. It's been my way of praying, of remembering who I am. Every stitch carries something of me, the patience of youth, the grief of loss, the quiet gratitude that grows with age. On that Tuesday afternoon, I was finishing a tablecloth for the church auction, a garden scene with hummingbirds. The colors were soft, spring-like pale greens and gentle blues, with gold thread catching the light from the window. Then I heard the sound of Rachel's heels coming down the hallway. That sharp, steady rhythm of leather against hardwood that always made my stomach tense. She never walked into my sewing room without an agenda. "What are you doing, Barbara?" she asked, stopping in the doorway. She didn't step inside. She never did. Her eyes scanned the space like she was inspecting something outdated, something that didn't belong in her world. "Just finishing this for the church," I said, trying to sound light. I smiled at her, though my heart already knew what was coming. Rachel tilted her head, her sleek hair gleaming under the light. "For the church auction? Still making those?" She laughed, a short, sharp sound that felt like a slap. "No one wants that old junk anymore, Barbara. It's 2025, not 1950. Her words sank deep, but I kept my expression still. Over the years, I'd learned how to stay calm, how to survive those little cuts she delivered with a smile. "People still enjoy handmade things," I said softly, eyes on my work. "Maybe old people," she said, crossing her arms. "My career in art design is about innovation, not this." She waved her hand toward my table, where threads, fabrics, and hoops were arranged in careful order. "You should try learning digital design. Maybe take a class. You might find it liberating." I nodded, though the suggestion stung. I didn't tell her that I had tried once, and the computer screen made me feel stupid, out of place. I preferred the texture of fabric under my hands, the quiet rhythm of creation that didn't need validation. But Rachel wouldn't understand that. To her, everything had to be efficient, marketable, new. She left soon after, her perfume lingering in the air long after her footsteps faded. I sat there for a while, the needle still between my fingers, but the thread had tangled. My throat burned. I thought of all the years I had spent making things for others, baby blankets, wedding gifts, memorial pieces, and how none of it seemed to matter now. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I sat by the window with a cup of tea gone cold and replayed her words over and over. No one wants that old junk anymore. Maybe she was right. Maybe the world had moved on. But even as I thought that, my hands found the embroidery hoop again. My fingers needed something to do, something familiar. I stitched until my eyes blurred, pouring every bit of hurt into the thread. 3 weeks later, I decided to post a photo of my finished tablecloth on Facebook. I wasn't trying to prove anything, I just wanted to share it with my small circle of friends, most of them women from church or old colleagues. The photo showed the hummingbirds mid-flight, their wings catching the light. I wrote a simple caption, "Finished this one last night." Took me 40 hours, but worth every stitch. When I woke the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Dozens of notifications. For a moment, I thought something was wrong. Then I saw it. Hundreds of likes, comments from strangers, and one that stood out in particular. "This is extraordinary. Who is the artist?" The name beside it made me blink. Helena Morse. I didn't know who she was, but the comments beneath hers were full of admiration. "The Helena Morse?" Someone had written. "You've got to be kidding," another user replied. "She's the top textile designer in the country." I sat there in my robe, staring at the screen, not fully understanding the weight of what I was seeing. Before I could even process it, there was a knock at the door. Rachel. My heart sank. She came in looking pale, almost breathless. "Did Helena Morse really comment on your post?" she asked immediately, not even saying hello. "I'm not sure who she is," I said. "But yes, she left a comment. Something nice about the embroidery." Rachel stared at me like she couldn't believe it. She's only the most respected textile designer in the country. My mentor, Barbara, the woman I've been trying to impress for 5 years. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, though she tried to sound in control. "Oh," I said quietly. "I didn't know." "She must have mistaken your post for someone else's," Rachel said quickly. "Don't respond to her. Don't embarrass me." "Embarrass you?" I repeated, confused. Rachel sighed. "You don't understand how this industry works. She'll think I've been hiding my mother-in-law's old-fashioned embroidery. It'll make me look unprofessional." Her tone grew colder. "Just delete the post, please." I stared down at my phone, at the little heart icon glowing beside Helena's comment. "I don't think I want to delete it," I said quietly. Rachel's eyes widened. "Barbara, don't do this. You'll ruin everything." "Everything?" I asked. "For who?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, breathing hard, her hand shaking as she reached for my phone. I held it tighter. "Rachel," I said, my voice breaking slightly, "I've spent my whole life creating things that no one ever noticed. For once, someone saw my work. Please don't take that away from me." For a moment, her expression softened. Then, she turned away. "Fine," she said, her voice flat. "Do whatever you want. Just don't expect me to clean up the mess." When she left, I sat back down at my sewing table. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from something else. For the first time in years, someone had looked at my work and called it extraordinary. Not because I was someone's wife, or mother-in-law, but because it had value on its own. I smiled through the tears that finally fell, my hands resting on the fabric. After all these years, after all the quiet and the small humiliations, it felt like my hands had finally spoken for me and someone important had listened. The message came that same afternoon, long after Rachel's footsteps had faded and the house had gone quiet. My phone buzzed with a new notification. It was from Helena Morse. I stared at her name, the same name that had turned Rachel pale only hours earlier. The message was short, polite, and somehow disarming. "Barbara, I must meet you. Your work speaks to something we've lost in modern design." For a long time, I just sat there, phone in hand, unable to move. My pulse quickened, my palms damp. Rachel's warning echoed in my mind, her sharp tone, the fear in her eyes when she told me not to respond. "Don't embarrass me." I could still hear it like a command. But something deep inside me, something I hadn't felt in years, began to stir. A quiet rebellion. That small, stubborn part of me that had always hated injustice, that whispered enough every time Rachel spoke down to me, refused to stay silent this time. I opened the message again and read it slowly, letting the words sink in. "Your work speaks to something we've lost. I didn't know exactly what she meant, but I knew how it made me feel seen. Not as someone's mother-in-law, or as an old woman clinging to a fading craft, but as an artist. My hands trembled as I typed my reply. "I'd be honored, Miss Morse." I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Then I sat there for a long time, staring at the blinking cursor, wondering what I'd just done. Helena responded almost immediately. "Let's meet tomorrow. Calf solstice, downtown, 2 p.m. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed 1,000 possible conversations. What if Rachel found out? What if Helena realized she'd made a mistake, that my work wasn't worth her time? Still, beneath all the fear, a small thread of excitement began to weave through the anxiety. The next afternoon, I arrived at Calf Solstice 15 minutes early. It was one of those small, quiet places that smelled of roasted coffee and warm pastries. I chose a table near the window and clutched my old leather portfolio against my chest. My reflection in the glass startled me. I looked both older and younger than I remembered, like a woman on the edge of rediscovering something she'd lost. When Helena walked in, I recognized her immediately from the photos online. She wasn't what I'd expected. I thought she'd be severe, maybe arrogant, like many people in design circles. Instead, she was warm, elegant, but unpretentious. Maybe in her early 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a low bun and eyes that seemed to really see people. "Barbara," she said, smiling as she extended her hand. "It's so lovely to meet you." Her handshake was firm but gentle, and in that small gesture, my nerves began to settle. "I can't believe you wanted to meet me," I admitted, embarrassed by the tremor in my voice. "I should be thanking you," she said. "When I saw your embroidery online, I couldn't look away. I've been designing textiles for 30 years, and I haven't seen work this emotionally honest in a decade. Emotionally honest. No one had ever described my embroidery that way before. People called it pretty or old-fashioned, but never honest. I felt my throat tighten. "My daughter-in-law says it's old junk," I heard myself say, and immediately regretted it. The words slipped out before I could stop them, as if my heart had spoken faster than my mind. Helena's expression shifted slightly, curiosity flickering behind her calm gaze. "Your daughter-in-law, Rachel Jenkins?" I froze. "You know her?" Helena nodded slowly. "She's been my assistant for 2 years. Talented, sharp, very ambitious. But," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "she lacks soul in her work. Everything she creates is technically flawless, but it feels detached. It's like she's designing from the head, not the heart." I didn't know what to say. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Helena reached for the fabric sample I had brought, holding it up to the light streaming through the cafe window. The tiny stitches shimmered, each thread catching the afternoon sun. "This," she said softly, "is what I mean by soul. There's truth in your work, a tenderness that can't be replicated digitally." I swallowed hard. "Thank you. That means more than you know." She looked at me for a long moment, then leaned forward. "Barbara, I'm curating a major exhibition at the Cleveland Museum of Art next month. Legacy Threads, the future of traditional craft. I want your pieces featured." The words seemed to hang in the air, impossible to absorb. That night, sleep felt like a stranger I had once known but could no longer recall. The silence in my house was so heavy, it seemed to press against the walls, making them groan. I tried reading, tried watching television, even prayed, but my mind kept circling the same question. What if Helena was right? What if there was still something left in me that mattered? Sometime after midnight, I went up to the attic. The air was dry and thick with dust, the kind that clings to your throat and smells faintly of old paper and cedar. I turned on the weak bulb hanging from the ceiling, its light trembling like it wasn't sure it should be there either. The boxes were stacked neatly, as they had been for years. My life, compartmentalized in cardboard. I opened one labeled Old Embroidery, expecting faded fabrics and tangled threads. Instead, I found envelopes, dozens of them, some yellowed, others crisp, all addressed to me. Each one bore the return address of a gallery, a craft magazine, or a textile fair. My breath caught. I didn't remember sending anything to these places. I sat on the floor, my knees cracking as I lowered myself, and began opening them one by one. Most had already been opened and resealed. A few still had faint traces of glue where they had been tampered with. My fingers shook as I read the first letter. Thank you for your inquiry, but we are not accepting unsolicited submissions at this time. The next one said the same. Then another, and another. By the fifth letter, my vision blurred. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. These weren't my rejections. They were Rachel's. She had written to them in my name. She had opened the replies before I ever saw them. And for years, she had let me believe I was invisible. I didn't realize I was crying until I saw dark spots blooming on the paper in my lap. I tried to imagine her sealing each envelope, slipping it back into its box, telling herself it was for my own good. The thought made something inside me twist. By morning, I felt hollowed out, but strangely calm. I brewed coffee, the scent filling the kitchen like a small act of defiance. When I heard Rachel's car pull up, I was ready. She came in with her usual brisk energy, talking on her phone, her voice coated with that sharp confidence she wore like perfume. When she saw me standing there, the phone slipped from her hand. "Did you send my work to galleries without telling me?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. Her cheeks flushed. "I was trying to help you see reality, Barbara. They all rejected you. You had no right. I had every right," she snapped. "You were embarrassing yourself and our family with your little hobby." "My hobby?" I repeated, feeling something rise in me, a tide I'd held back for years. "This is my life's work." She rolled her eyes. "You don't understand how things work now. People don't care about hand-stitching or doilies or whatever it is you do. It's outdated. And yet Helena Morse thinks it matters," I said quietly. That stopped her. Just for a second. Then her face hardened. "If you contact Helena, if you try to weasel your way into that exhibition, I will make sure Michael knows exactly how you're trying to sabotage my career." She grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving the scent of her perfume hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. I stood there shaking, not from fear, but from rage. A deep, burning anger I'd buried under politeness for too long. That afternoon, I called Helena. My hands were still trembling, but my voice was steady. "I'm in. I'll do the exhibition." Helena's relief came through the phone like a warm breeze. "I'm so glad, Barbara. I knew you'd say yes." For the next 3 weeks, I worked in secret. Every morning, after Michael and Rachel left for work, I locked myself in my sewing room. I stitched until my fingers ached and my eyes blurred, pouring everything I couldn't say aloud into thread and fabric. Each piece told a story of silence, of humiliation, of the courage it takes to speak again after being silenced. I created one called The Unraveling, a cascade of broken threads stitched into the shape of a heart splitting apart. Another, Resilience, used rough linen scarred by deliberate cuts, mended with golden thread. I didn't care if anyone liked them. I just needed to make them exist. One evening, Michael dropped by unexpectedly. I nearly jumped, hiding a piece under a sheet. "Mom, Rachel says you've been acting strange," he said, concern softening his face. "Is everything okay?" I looked at him, my son, my boy who used to sit on the floor of my sewing room while I worked, drawing pictures beside me. The boy who had grown into a man who couldn't see how small his wife had made me feel. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. He studied me for a moment, maybe sensing the lie, but he didn't press. "All right, Mom, just take care of yourself, okay?" When he left, I sat in the quiet, the air thick with unspoken things. I wanted to tell him everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. The night before the exhibition opening, I was packing my final piece when the phone rang. I didn't even need to check the caller ID. "I know what you did, Barbara," Rachel's voice hissed through the line. "Helena just told me you're in the show." "Rachel, you've ruined everything," she cut in, her voice trembling with fury. "Don't bother coming tomorrow." The call ended with a sharp click. I sat there for a long moment, the dial tone buzzing in my ear before setting the phone down. I stared at the fabric in front of me, the final stitch still waiting. My hands moved on their own. I finished it, slowly, carefully, with love. Whatever happened tomorrow, I knew one thing. My voice was finally being heard, not through shouting, but through the quiet persistence of thread. I stood in front of my closet that evening, the faint smell of lavender sachets rising as I opened the door. My hands trembled as I brushed past cardigans and faded sweaters until they found it, the dress I hadn't worn in years. Deep blue silk, soft and cool beneath my fingers, a piece of another life I'd nearly forgotten. I held it up against myself in the mirror, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her shoulders were straighter, her eyes brighter. There was a spark I hadn't seen in a long time, maybe since before Rachel moved in, before my quiet corners began to shrink around her loud certainty. When I slipped the dress on, it fit differently, tighter at the waist, looser at the shoulders, but somehow it still felt right. A reminder that even fabric could hold memory, could forgive the years. My neighbor Dorothy, who'd insisted on helping me get ready, clapped her hands when I stepped into the kitchen. "You look stunning, Barbara. Absolutely radiant," she said, adjusting one of my earrings with the care of an old friend. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Good," she said, smiling. "That means it matters." Her kindness steadied me more than she could know. As she dabbed a bit of color on my lips, I caught her reflection in the mirror. Two women of a certain age, both marked by time, yet carrying stories that refused to fade. By the time I arrived at the Cleveland Museum of Art, the night sky had deepened into indigo. The museum blazed with light, the grand glass entrance reflecting 100 small fragments of people moving inside laughter, champagne glasses, the low hum of conversation. My stomach churned so hard I thought I might turn back, but then Helena appeared at the door, her face breaking into that warm, steady smile that had drawn me in from the first day we met. She reached for my hands. "Are you ready for this?" I exhaled shakily. "I don't think I'll ever be ready." "That's usually a good sign," she said softly, linking her arm through mine. The moment we entered, the noise seemed to fade. She guided me past a wall of shimmering fabrics, installations that looked more like dreams than cloth. Then she stopped, turned me toward a section illuminated by soft golden light, and said, "Here." I followed her gaze and gasped. My embroidery pieces were displayed like paintings, each one framed in shadow boxes, each lit carefully so that the stitches caught the light like threads of silver and flame. Beneath each, a small plaque described my work: revolutionary, emotionally profound. A revival of human touch in an age of automation. I couldn't breathe. My hands came up to my mouth, trembling as my eyes filled. "Helena, I can't believe it. They look beautiful. They are beautiful," she said gently. "This is where they belong." For a long moment I stood there in silence, feeling the air thicken around me. Every humiliation, every whispered dismissal from Rachel, every year I'd spent thinking my art had no place in the world, all of it seemed to dissolve under the warm light of that room. Then I heard it. "Barbara?" A man's voice, uncertain. I turned, my heart skipping. Michael stood a few steps away, confusion and disbelief flickering across his face. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Rachel said. "What did Rachel say exactly?" Helena interrupted, stepping beside me with quiet authority. Before Michael could answer, I saw movement in the crowd. Rachel, elegant in her black dress, her face pale and tight with fury, cutting through the sea of guests like a storm front. "Barbara, we need to talk. Now." She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. "No." The word came out steady and firm, a tone I hadn't heard from myself in years. "We're going to talk here, in front of everyone." Gasps rippled nearby. People turned, sensing the kind of raw emotion that couldn't be rehearsed. I could feel eyes on us, the crowd forming quietly, curious, cautious, hungry for drama. Rachel's jaw clenched. You stole this opportunity from me. You knew how important this exhibition was. I stole nothing, I said. Helena invited me based on my work. Your work? Her laugh was sharp and bitter. You mean your outdated, worthless hobby? A low murmur moved through the crowd. Someone lifted a phone. I saw flashes. My heart raced, but I didn't look away. Helena stepped forward, calm but firm. Rachel, I think you should stop. No. Rachel's voice cracked, anger spilling into desperation. Everyone should know the truth. This woman is trying to live through me because her own life amounted to nothing. The words hit me like a slap. For a moment, everything went silent, the kind of silence that only comes right before something breaks. I saw my son's face pale, his mouth parting as if he wanted to speak but didn't know how. And then something inside me, something I'd buried for too many years, finally snapped. I straightened my back, meeting Rachel's eyes. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. I did live through others. Through my husband, through my son, through you. I forgot who I was, and I let you make me small because I thought keeping peace was the same as keeping love. The crowd was silent now, their phones forgotten. But no more, I continued, my voice trembling but clear. My life isn't nothing. My work isn't worthless. Every stitch I made was a piece of my story of every woman who's ever been told she's too old, too sentimental, too late. Rachel took a step back, her face tightening. You're making a fool of yourself. Maybe, I said softly, but at least I'm finally being honest. Michael stepped forward then, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, is this all true? I turned to him. Ask your wife who sent those gallery letters. Who signed my name on rejections I never saw. Rachel froze. The color drained from her face. Michael looked from me to her, realization dawning. Rachel? He asked quietly. She said nothing. Helena, ever the professional, placed a hand on my shoulder. Barbara, I think it's time for you to take your place. People are waiting to meet the artist. The word artist made my eyes sting. I nodded, letting her lead me away as whispers followed us. Behind me, I heard Michael's voice, low but firm. We'll talk later. I didn't turn around. As the night unfolded, people approached me, curators, collectors, students, each speaking with warmth, with awe. They touched the fabric with reverence, asked about my process, about the stories behind each piece. For once, I didn't shrink. I spoke of beauty, of pain, of how thread could carry memory like veins carry blood. Hours later, when the lights began to dim and the crowd thinned, I stood alone before Resilience, my favorite piece. The golden stitches glimmered faintly in the quiet gallery. I reached out and touched the glass, whispering, "We made it." And for the first time in years, I didn't mean the embroidery. I meant me. The gallery had gone completely silent. It was the kind of silence that hums beneath the skin, thick and expectant, the air charged with something raw and uncontainable. My heartbeat was a drum in my ears as I turned to Rachel, who stood before me, pale and trembling, eyes darting around the room as though searching for an exit that no longer existed. "You want truth, Rachel?" I said, my voice carrying farther than I intended. "Let's talk about truth." People edged closer. The soft whir of cameras and the shifting of feet filled the space, but no one spoke. Even the music had stopped. I reached into my purse, my hands steady now, and pulled out the small stack of letters I'd kept tucked there since the night I'd found them in the attic. The paper was creased, fragile, and the sight of it brought back the sting of that discovery, the betrayal that had lived unseen inside my own home. "These," I said, lifting the letters high enough for those nearby to see, "are rejection letters from galleries. Letters you sent on my behalf without my knowledge, using my worst pieces, pieces I had thrown away." Rachel's face went white. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Then, in a strangled whisper, she managed, "I was trying to help." "You were trying to sabotage me," I said, each word cutting through the air like a thread pulled too tight. "To prove I was worthless so I'd stay quiet and small, so that your world, your perfect narrative, could stay intact." Michael, who had been standing a few feet away, stepped forward suddenly. His face was pale, his eyes darting between us. "What letters?" I handed them to him. His hands shook as he flipped through them, his gaze scanning each page. I could see the color drain from his face as the truth began to take shape in front of him. "Rachel, what is this?" he asked, voice trembling. She shook her head, her words stumbling over themselves. "Your mother is delusional. I never." Michael's voice rose, sharp and cold. "These have your email signature." A murmur swept through the gallery, people whispering, shifting closer. Rachel's mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes were wide now, glassy, pleading. "I didn't mean, Michael. Please, I just wanted to protect you. To protect us." She was going to embarrass the family. Before anyone could respond, Helena cleared her throat. Her presence alone silenced the room again. "There's something else everyone should know," she said, her tone calm but unyielding. 3 months ago, Rachel submitted a portfolio to me for review, claiming the designs were hers. My heart stopped. Helena reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and connected it to the small projector set up nearby. The wall behind us came to life with images clean, digital reproductions of my embroidery patterns. But they weren't exactly mine anymore. They had been flattened, simplified, stripped of their imperfections. And at the bottom of each image was a name: Rachel Jenkins. Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone whispered, "That's her mother-in-law's work." Another voice, hushed but certain, "I saw that on Facebook months ago." Helena continued, her voice steady. "I recognized Barbara's work immediately from a post she shared last year. That's why I reached out to her in the first place." The crowd erupted, whispers, murmurs, flashes of light from phones and cameras. Rachel's voice rose above the noise, high and shaking. "I was inspired by her work, that's all. Everyone borrows ideas. It's called artistic influence. It's called theft," Helena said quietly. "And I've already contacted the design board about this matter." Rachel froze, her body going rigid. Her eyes darted toward Michael, who stood motionless, holding the letters like they were burning his hands. The color had drained from his face completely. "You told me Mom's embroidery was embarrassing," he said slowly, his voice low, trembling not with anger but disbelief. "You told me she was getting senile, that she'd become obsessed with her crafts." "Michael, please," Rachel's voice cracked. She reached for him. He stepped back, his expression filled with something that broke me even as it vindicated me grief. "How long?" he asked softly. "How long have you been lying to me about my mother?" Rachel began to cry, but it was the kind of crying that came from desperation, not remorse. Her mascara streaked down her face as she stammered, "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to succeed. You don't know what it's like to live in her shadow, to feel small next to someone who never even tried and still gets everything handed to her." "Handed to me?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "I gave up my dreams for this family. Every chance I had, I turned into support for someone else. You have no idea what it costs to love without being seen." Her sobs turned into shaking silence. Michael's shoulders sagged. He looked down at the letters again, then at Helena's phone still projecting my stolen designs on the wall. "I can't believe this," he whispered. And then, from the back of the room, a woman stepped forward. She was elegant, maybe in her 50s, dressed in a gray suit that matched her calm, steady gaze. I recognized her face vaguely from art magazines and local exhibitions, but I couldn't place her name. She spoke clearly, her voice measured and firm. "I'm Lydia Parks," she said, "curator for the Midwestern Textile Conservatory. I've been following this story quietly for a while now, Mrs. Jenkins." She nodded toward me. "Your work has reached people far beyond what you might imagine. It's raw, emotional, human. So we need that kind of honesty in art today." Then she turned to Rachel. "And plagiarism has no place in it." Rachel covered her face with her hands, her body folding inward. The crowd was silent, not out of cruelty, but out of discomfort, the collective recognition of witnessing something irreversible. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. But all I felt was an ache deep in my chest, The kind of ache that comes from seeing the truth laid bare, knowing there's no way to return to what was before. Michael looked at me, his eyes full of regret and confusion. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm so sorry." I touched his arm gently. "It's not your fault, sweetheart." "Sweetheart, some truths take longer to surface, that's all." He nodded, eyes glistening. Beside us, Rachel began to sob quietly, her shoulders shaking, her voice barely audible. I never meant to hurt anyone. I believed her, in a way. I believed she had wanted to be loved, to be seen, just like I had. We had both been fighting the same hunger, only in opposite directions. The murmurs faded, the cameras stopped flashing, and for the first time all night, the room felt still again. The truth was out, fragile and painful, but also cleansing, like the first breath after a long storm. And as I stood there, surrounded by the soft glow of my own creations, I realized something. Art, like truth, survives everything that tries to silence it. The man moved briskly, his press badge glinting under the museum lights. "I'm from WKC," he said, slightly breathless. "We've been covering the exhibit all week. I think the world would want to see this, an artist rediscovered, a story of truth and redemption." His words rippled through the crowd like a spark catching flame. Suddenly, I was surrounded by cameras, microphones, flashes. For a moment, I wanted to disappear. My instinct was to hide, to protect the small, quiet part of me that had only ever asked to create without judgment. But then I looked around at Helena, steady and proud, at Michael, his expression full of grief and apology, and even at Rachel, whose face had crumpled into something fragile, childlike, utterly human. I drew a slow breath. "If the world wants to see," I said softly, "then let them see not scandal, but healing." My voice trembled, but I didn't care. Let them see what truth looks like when it finally breathes. Margaret Chun gave me a small, knowing smile, her eyes shining with approval. "That's the spirit of real art, Barbara," she said. "It's not about perfection. It's about courage." The cameras rolled as she took my hand. Her grip was warm, grounding. "We'll arrange the acquisition next week. But for now, enjoy this moment. You've earned it. Earned it." The phrase echoed through me as the applause swelled again. But it didn't feel like triumph, it felt like release. The tension I'd carried for years seemed to dissolve, replaced by a quiet, aching gratitude. Rachel turned to go, shoulders shaking. I caught her hand gently before she could leave. "Rachel," I said, "don't run from this. Not again." She froze, tears streaking her mascara. "You don't have to pretend to forgive me." "I'm not pretending," I replied. "You hurt me deeply, but holding on to that pain has hurt me too. Maybe we both deserve to let go." Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she just nodded, a small broken motion that somehow felt like the first step towards something whole. The crowd slowly dispersed, their curiosity sated, their hearts perhaps moved. Helena guided me to a quiet corner near one of my larger embroideries, a circular pattern of golden threads radiating from a dark blue center, like a burst of light breaking through shadow. "Do you remember when you told me embroidery was a form of prayer?" she asked. I smiled faintly. Every stitch was a way to make sense of silence. "And now that silence is speaking," she said. I traced a line of thread with my fingertip. "It's strange. I used to believe art was my escape from pain, but maybe it was always the way through it." Helena nodded thoughtfully. "That's what makes it real. You didn't just create beauty, Barbara. You transformed it from grief." Margaret approached again, this time with a small group of art students trailing behind her. They were young, eager, wide-eyed, clutching notebooks. "Barbara," she said, "would you be open to giving a small talk tomorrow? About your process, your story." I hesitated, feeling the old uncertainty flicker inside me. Then I looked at the student's face, so full of hope, of hunger to understand. "Yes," I said, "I'd like that very much." As the last guests drifted out and the lights softened, Michael came over, his expression torn between pride and remorse. "Mom," he said quietly, I don't know how to apologize. I believed her. I let her convince me you were. His voice cracked. Less than you are. I took his hand in both of mine. You were trying to keep peace in your home. I understand that now. But love that hides truth isn't peace. It's fear. He nodded, his eyes wet. I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. You don't have to, I said. Just love, honestly. That's all I ever wanted. Rachel had disappeared by then. I didn't expect her to stay. Still, a strange peace settled over me. For years, her cruelty had defined my silence. Tonight, her confession had freed it. As I left the museum, the night air felt sharp and alive against my skin. Snowflakes were beginning to fall, soft and slow, catching in my hair like tiny sparks. I thought of the embroidery threads at home, silver, gold, indigo, and how each one connected something fragile to something eternal. Dorothy was waiting in her car by the curb, waving wildly when she saw me. "Barbara!" she called. "You're famous now!" I laughed, the sound surprising me with its lightness. "No, Dorothy," I said, sliding into the passenger seat. "Just finally seen." She grinned. "Same thing, honey." As we drove home, I watched the city lights blur through the window blue. Gold, white-like threads weaving into something larger than either of us could name. My hands rested on my lap, still trembling faintly, not from fear anymore, but from something close to joy. Later that night, in the quiet of my sewing room, I stood before the unfinished piece I'd abandoned months ago. The one I couldn't bring myself to complete while doubt still lived inside me. I sat down, threaded the needle, and began again. Each stitch was slower, steadier. I thought of Margaret's words, Helena's kindness, Michael's tears, Rachel's confession. All of it, pain, love, betrayal, forgiveness, became part of the design. When I finished, dawn was breaking. Pale light filled the room, washing the threads in soft gold. I pinned the embroidery to the wall and stepped back. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. For the first time in a long while, so was I. Outside, the snow had stopped. The world looked clean again, ready for whatever came next. And as I stood there, surrounded by the quiet hum of a new morning, I realized that sometimes redemption doesn't roar, it whispers. It begins not with applause, but with the courage to pick up a needle and start stitching again. The world was watching. The words clung to me like static as the crowd slowly thinned, flashes dimming, murmurs fading into the marble hush of the gallery. My heart still thudded against my ribs, but it wasn't from fear anymore, it was disbelief. The kind that blurs the edges of reality until everything feels both too bright and too far away. Helena touched my arm gently. "You should sit," she said, steering me toward a bench near the entrance. Her voice had softened, motherly now. "Breathe, Barbara. Just breathe." I did as she said, closing my eyes. I could still hear faint applause echoing in the distance, mixed with the rustle of people leaving. The word viral replayed in my mind. Viral, like a storm that had swept my quiet life into the open sea. Dorothy sat beside me, her face flushed from excitement and concern. "Honey, I think you might need a new phone number," she said, half joking. "Channel 5 called my house looking for you. Can you believe it? You're famous." "I don't feel famous," I murmured. "I feel exposed." She squeezed my hand. Sometimes exposure is how light gets in. It was something I'd once said to my students years ago, before arthritis stole my dexterity and confidence. Hearing it, now reflected back at me, made my throat tighten. Helena crouched down in front of me. "Listen," she said. "Tomorrow morning's show will call again. I think you should do it. Tell your story your way, before someone else tells it for you." I nodded faintly, though my chest felt heavy. "What story, Helena? The story of a foolish old woman who let her daughter-in-law steal from her? Who stayed silent until it was too late?" "No," she said. "The story of a woman who found her voice and used it to reclaim her dignity. The world needs that. The world." It felt too large, too loud. For decades, my world had been small spools of thread, fabric folded like prayer books, the hum of my old singer machine. My joy lived in the quiet rhythm of creation. Now that quiet had shattered, replaced by a roar of strangers' opinions and flashing cameras. I stood slowly, my knees unsteady. I need to go home. Helena hesitated, then nodded. I'll have someone escort you through the back exit. There's a car waiting. We moved through the dim corridors of the museum, the air thick with the scent of waxed floors and echoes of applause. When we stepped outside, snow was falling soft, relentless, cleansing. I breathed it in like medicine. The car ride home was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. Streetlights blurred into gold threads against the dark. I thought of Rachel's face, pale, trembling, her voice breaking as she confessed. There was no victory in my heart, only sorrow. I had wanted truth, yes, but not this destruction. When we reached my house, Dorothy gasped. 3 news vans were parked across the street, their lights cutting through the snow. Reporters huddled by the sidewalk, their breath rising in little clouds. "Oh my God," she whispered. The driver frowned. "We can sneak you through the back, Mrs. Jenkins." "Please," I said, barely above a whisper. We slipped through the alley and entered through the kitchen door. The house was dark, except for the small lamp I'd left on by my embroidery table. My teacup still sat there from the morning, cold now, forgotten. I sank into the nearest chair, exhaustion wrapping around me like a heavy coat. "I just wanted to share something beautiful," I said quietly. "That's all I ever wanted." Dorothy touched my shoulder. "You did, sweetheart. And look what it's done. You've touched millions. Maybe that's the point." Her phone buzzed. "They're saying you're trending on social media," she added. "People are calling you the embroiderer of truth." I let out a small, incredulous laugh. "The embroiderer of truth," I repeated softly. "That sounds like someone else entirely." Later that night, after Dorothy left, I made tea and sat by the window, watching the snow pile against the glass. Across the street, the news crews were still there, cameras glinting under streetlights. I should have felt anger, or pride, or fear, but instead, I felt stillness, as if some unseen thread had finally been pulled tight enough to make sense of the pattern. My phone vibrated. A text from Michael. "Mom, I don't know where to begin. Rachel's gone to her sister's. She's devastated. I'm so sorry for everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to try to rebuild what we lost. I love you." Tears welled in my eyes. I typed back, "Love doesn't vanish, Michael. It just learns to heal in silence until it's ready to speak again." I put the phone down and stared at my embroidery wall. The pieces hung like small constellations, threads of memory, pain, resilience. Somewhere out there, millions of strangers were seeing them for the first time, reading captions about courage and betrayal. They didn't know that courage, for me, had simply meant showing up again and again after being dismissed, ignored, erased. I went to my sewing table and pulled out the piece I had started that morning before the gallery eventa. Swirling pattern of blues and silvers. I began stitching again, slower this time, each movement grounding me. Around midnight, the doorbell rang. My heart leapt. Through the window, I saw a woman standing in the snow. Rachel. Her mascara had run, her hair damp with melted flakes. She looked smaller somehow, deflated, lost. I opened the door. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she said, "I didn't know where else to go." I stepped aside. "Come in." She entered hesitantly, glancing at the embroidery on the walls. "They're saying I'm a monster," she whispered. "Online. On the news. I deserve it, I suppose." I shook my head slowly. "You deserve to learn." "That's different." She looked at me, eyes wide, almost childlike. "How can you even stand to look at me?" "Because I've made peace with what you tried to take. You can't steal something that was never about possession. Art, love, grace. They aren't owned, Rachel. They're shared." Her lips trembled. "I don't know how to make this right." "You start," I said softly, "by making something honest." We sat there for a long time, the snow thickening outside, the world still watching from its screens. 2 women, both broken in different ways, trying to understand how truth could hurt and heal at once. When she finally left, dawn was breaking again. My phone buzzed with another message from Helena this time. They want you on national television tomorrow. Think of it not as publicity, but as purpose. Tell the truth the way only you can. I looked out at the pale morning sky, at the silent street lined with camera vans, at the world beyond my window that had somehow become mine to speak to. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I whispered to myself, let them see the stitches, the flaws, the beauty that comes from mending. Then I turned back to my embroidery hoop, where a new thread waited, gold, shimmering, patient. And as I pulled the needle through the fabric, I realized that maybe going viral wasn't about fame at all. Maybe it was just the universe saying, we see you now. By dawn, the air outside my house buzzed with the low hum of generators, camera crews, and muffled voices. The streetlights hadn't even gone out yet, but the world had already arrived on my doorstep. Microphones, flashes, questions shouted into the cold morning. None of it felt real. My name, Barbara Jenkins, was printed on banners and spoken through megaphones like it belonged to someone else. Dorothy had been up since 5, pacing in her robe. When she finally peeked through the curtains and saw the chaos outside, she turned to me with a face both amused and horrified. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "you're officially a national obsession." I didn't laugh. My hands trembled too much to hold the teacup she offered me. "I never wanted this," I murmured. "Not like this." "Come on," she said firmly. "Grab your coat. We're sneaking you out through the back." My house still has blinds that actually close. So, like a pair of fugitives, we slipped through the alley behind my garden, the snow crunching softly beneath our boots. The air smelled like wet pine and diesel from the news vans. By the time we reached her kitchen, my pulse was pounding in my ears. Dorothy pulled the blinds shut and exhaled. They're safe, for now. But safety felt like an illusion. Even here, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating texts, calls, voicemails, interview requests. I turned it face down on the counter. At noon, the ringing started again. Dorothy sighed. "You can't hide forever, Barbara." I glanced at the screen. "Michael, Mom, we need to talk." His voice cracked through the line. "Can I come over?" "Dorothy's house," I said softly. "Back door's open." When he arrived, I hardly recognized him. His shoulders slumped as though carrying something heavy, eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness. He dropped onto Dorothy's couch, elbows on his knees. "Rachel's at her sister's house," he said finally. "She won't talk to me. She said I have to choose her or you." The words hit like a physical blow. I felt something twist inside my chest. "Michael," I began carefully, "I never wanted to come between you, I know." His voice broke. "But I need to understand something. Why didn't you tell me what she was doing to you? The letters, the lies, all of it." It was the question I'd feared most. I took a breath, my hands clasped tightly together. "Because you were happy," I said. "Because I thought maybe I was imagining it. Because I didn't want to be that mother who ruins her son's marriage. I thought, if I stayed quiet, maybe things would balance themselves out." He looked at me, disbelief shadowing his face. "So you just suffered?" "I thought that's what love was," I whispered. "Sacrifice. Staying silent so your child can have peace." Michael's eyes filled, and when he finally spoke, his voice trembled. "That's not love, Mom. That's martyrdom. You shouldn't have had to protect me from the truth. I should have protected you." His words undid me. For years I had carried the guilt of failing him, of not being strong enough, brave enough. Now, seeing the man he'd become, the cracks in his voice, the tenderness in his regret, I realized how deeply we had both misunderstood love. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that holds too many unspoken things. The clock ticked softly in Dorothy's kitchen, the scent of cinnamon tea hanging in the air. Then my phone rang again, an unknown number. Out of habit, I answered. "Hello, Barbara? This is Jennifer Morrison from the National Embroidery Guild. We'd like to award you our Lifetime Achievement Award at next month's ceremony in New York." I blinked, unsure I'd heard correctly. I what? Before I could respond, another call flashed on the screen, then another. A publisher, a documentary filmmaker, a woman from a textile foundation wanting to fund a scholarship in my name. It was dizzying, absurd, like my quiet little craft had been caught in a storm of attention. Michael watched the scene unfold, eyes wide. "Mom," he said, voice low, "your life is about to change completely. Are you ready for that?" I sank back into the couch, pressing a hand to my chest. "I don't know if I want that," I admitted. "I just wanted respect for my work, for what I built with my hands. I wanted Rachel to stop making me feel worthless." He gave a small, sad smile. "You got more than respect. You got validation from the whole country. People finally see what you've been all along." His words should have comforted me, but instead they brought tears. Validation didn't erase the loneliness of being unseen for so long. It didn't heal the years of silence, of being laughed at behind closed doors. Recognition was beautiful, but it was also late. My phone buzzed again, a text. I hesitated before reading it. "You've destroyed everything. I hope you're happy. Rachel." I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. A second message followed seconds later. "Michael is filing for separation. This is your fault." My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. Michael saw the look on my face and reached for the phone. When he read the messages, his expression hardened. "She's lashing out," he said quietly. "That's not on you," but I shook my head. "Of course it's on me." I broke the silence. "I exposed her. I should have waited. Found a gentler way, Mom." His voice stopped me. Firm, but soft. "There is no gentle way to reveal truth. You didn't destroy anything. You just stopped pretending." I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to keep from crying. For so long I had imagined justice as something clean, redemptive, a light pouring into the darkness. But now I saw that truth was messier, that sometimes healing required breaking apart the very things you thought you were saving. Michael leaned back, exhaustion pulling at his features. "I don't know what's going to happen," he said, "but I know this. I'm proud of you. I wish I'd seen what was happening sooner." I reached over and took his hand. "You see it now. That's enough." Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, blending with the hum of the news vans still stationed down the block. Dorothy peeked through the blinds and shook her head. "They're not leaving anytime soon. You're the story of the week, Barbara Jenkins." But the story didn't feel like mine anymore. It belonged to everyone watching people projecting their own pain, their own longing for courage, onto my life. After Michael left, I sat by the window with a blanket draped over my shoulders, staring at the pale winter sky. My hands still shook, but my mind felt clearer. The fractures in my family were real, deep, but maybe necessary. Like cracks in pottery, they let the light through. That night, I took out a new piece of linen and began sketching fine gold lines weaving through soft gray, threads crossing and diverging, meeting again in unexpected harmony. It would be called fracture, I decided. Not as an ending, but as a beginning, because sometimes breaking apart is the only way to let the truth breathe. When the first stitch pierced the fabric, I felt something lift inside me, grief, yes, but also grace. Whatever came next, I would face it as myself, not a victim, not a martyr. Just Barbara is still standing, still creating, still learning how to love without disappearing. The night before the interview, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, staring at the faint light leaking through the curtains, listening to the restless hum of my own heart. I had agreed to appear on Morning America, but I had made one condition clear to the producers. I would not be part of a spectacle. I would not feed the outrage machine that had already consumed so much of my family's dignity. I wanted something quieter, more human, something that might begin to heal what fame had torn open. Before dawn, I dialed Rachel's number. My hands trembled as I pressed the phone to my ear. For a long time, there was only silence. Then her voice, flat, brittle, but still hers. "We need to talk," I said. "Really talk. No cameras, no audience, no headlines. Just us. A pause stretched, fragile and uncertain. Where? She finally asked. There's a park halfway between our houses, I said softly. Meet me there in an hour? When I arrived, the air was cool and smelled faintly of damp leaves. The sky was a washed-out gray, the kind of color that feels like the world is holding its breath. I sat on a bench near the pond and waited, clutching a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Rachel appeared on the path a few minutes later. Her usual poise was gone. Her hair was unbrushed, her clothes rumpled. She looked small, fragile, and unbearably human. The sight of her like that stripped of her perfection, her armor hurt more than I expected. She didn't sit right away. She stood in front of me, arms crossed, her jaw trembling. I lost everything because of you, she said. Her voice broke on the last word, and something in me softened, even as a part of me bristled at the accusation. No, I said quietly. You lost everything because of your own choices. Rachel flinched as if I had slapped her. I gestured for her to sit, and after a moment, she did, lowering herself onto the bench like a person stepping onto thin ice. For a while, neither of us spoke. A gust of wind stirred the branches overhead, and a flurry of amber leaves drifted down between us. I'm going on national television tomorrow, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper, and I need you to know something. She turned her head slightly, her eyes wary but curious. I'm not going to destroy you. She blinked, confusion flickering across her face. What do you mean? I mean I could, I said gently. I could tell them everything, the cruel things you said, the lies, the way you tried to erase me from my own work. America would eat it up. The narrative of the wicked daughter-in-law and the saintly grandmother people would love that. Then why haven't you? She asked, her voice cracking. I looked at her, really looked. Beneath the exhaustion and shame, I saw traces of the young woman she used to be, the one who had once brought me flowers and nervously asked about stitch patterns, the one who used to blush when Michael kissed her cheek. Because I remember who you were, I said softly. You were kind. You were gentle. You wanted to belong. That girl is still in there somewhere, Rachel. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her eyes glistened, and she pressed her hands against her face as if trying to hold herself together. That girl, she whispered through her fingers, got eaten alive in design school. The professors told me I was too soft, too sentimental. They said no one wanted tradition anymore, that if I didn't toughen up, I'd be irrelevant. So I learned to be hard, to fight, to win. And in the process, I said quietly, you forgot how to be kind to yourself and to others. Rachel's shoulders shook. I know, she said, tears spilling freely now. I know what I became, and I hate it. I hate what I did to you. Something inside me broke open, then, not in pain, but in release. First, I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling. Here's what I'm going to do tomorrow, I said. I'm going to tell them that family is complicated, that love and cruelty sometimes come wrapped in the same ribbon, and that I forgive you. Her head snapped up. Why would you do that? After everything? Because holding on to anger will poison me, I said, and because I want Michael to have a real marriage, one built on truth, not fear. Rachel's tears came harder. She covered her face and sobbed, not the elegant kind of crying people do in movies, but raw, guttural, unrestrained grief, the kind that comes when the mask finally breaks. I pulled her into my arms, and to my surprise, she let me. For years I had wanted to hold her, to bridge the impossible distance between us. Now, in that quiet park, surrounded by the whisper of falling leaves, we clung to each other like two women finally acknowledging their shared pain. I don't deserve your forgiveness, she murmured against my shoulder. None of us do, I said, but we need it anyway. We stayed like that for a long time. The morning light softened, warming our faces. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed, and the sound cut through the tension like sunlight breaking through fog. When Rachel finally pulled away, her face was blotchy and red, but there was something new in her expression, something fragile but real. What will you say on the show? she asked. The truth, I said. That art saved me. That speaking up saved me. And that forgiveness, no matter how imperfect, is the only way forward. Rachel nodded slowly. I hope someday Michael can forgive me too. He will, I said gently. But first, you need to forgive yourself. She gave a small, broken laugh. That might take a while. Then take your time, I said. Healing doesn't happen on anyone's schedule. We parted quietly. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because I was no longer carrying it alone. That night, as I prepared for the interview, I spread my embroidery pieces across the table. I ran my hands over the stitches, tracing the stories hidden in the threads, the years of silence, the buried hurt, the slow, stubborn return of strength. Each piece told a part of my life, and together they made something whole. I rehearsed my words carefully, not to protect Rachel, but to tell a bigger truth about what it means to stand up, to break a pattern that has lasted too long, to choose compassion even when every wound screams for revenge. As I turned off the light, I whispered into the darkness, not as a prayer, but as a promise. Tomorrow, I'll speak the truth. Not to win, not to punish, but to heal. The Morning America studio was blindingly bright. Everything gleamed, the polished floor, the cameras, the smiles that seemed too perfect to be real. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it over the hum of the lights. I wore the dress I had made the week before, a soft cream fabric, embroidered with phoenixes rising from flames. Their wings shimmered under the studio lights, and I smiled faintly at the irony. I had stitched them in a moment of quiet defiance, not realizing how prophetic they would become. David Park greeted me with a warmth that felt genuine. "Barbara, your story has touched millions," he said, leaning forward just enough to make me feel seen. "Tell us, how does it feel to finally be recognized?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. The air felt thick with everything that had led me here, the years of silence, the humiliation, the small private victories that no one had noticed but me. Finally, I took a slow breath. "It feels overwhelming," I said truthfully. "But if I may, I'd like to say something about my daughter-in-law, Rachel." I could sense the shift immediately. The studio crew stilled. The producer's hand froze mid-air. They wanted drama, not grace. They were waiting for me to deliver the headline that would light up the internet for another day. But that wasn't why I was here. Rachel, I continued softly, is talented, brilliant even. But she got lost trying to compete in a world that told her traditional craft was worthless. She believed that lie so completely, she tried to make me believe it too. David hesitated, glancing at the producer before asking the question everyone was waiting for. "Do you forgive her for stealing your designs?" I nodded. "I do, because I've learned something in all of this. Hurt people hurt people. And healing requires grace for her and for me." The room seemed to exhale. David smiled, not the TV smile, but something more human. The conversation shifted then to my upcoming exhibition, the Smithsonian acquisition, and Victoria Hartwell's offer. I spoke carefully, from the heart, wanting every word to mean something. "I've decided to donate half of the licensing money," I said. "It will fund scholarships for women over 50 who want to pursue art degrees. Because it's never too late to find your voice." That was the moment everything changed. The audience applauded, some even stood, and for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like someone surviving a storm. I felt like the sun breaking through it. After the interview, my phone began to buzz non-stop calls, messages, emails, notifications blurring together. The most important message came from Michael. "Mom," he wrote, "Rachel and I watched together. We're going to try couples therapy. Thank you for giving us a chance." I pressed my hand over my heart and whispered, "Thank you." Then Helena called. Her voice was electric. "3 more museums want your work. You're booked solid for exhibitions for the next 2 years, Barbara." Not long after, a text from Victoria, the Heritage Collection pre-orders, broke our website. "You're officially a brand." I laughed through tears. Me, a brand. I had spent my whole life just trying to be seen, and suddenly, The world couldn't stop looking. But the message that undid me came from someone I didn't know. I'm 71. And I stopped painting because my family said it was a waste of time. I picked up my brushes again today because of you. I cried then, quietly, as the sun began to rise outside my window. For the first time in decades, I felt that what I had endured, every humiliation, every dismissal, every moment I had doubted my worth, had been transformed into something meaningful. 6 months later, my life looked nothing like before. Michael's old bedroom had become my studio expanded, bright, filled with bolts of fabric, spools of thread, and the soft hum of my sewing machine. The air smelled faintly of lavender and linen. My days were full again, not with obligation, but with purpose. One afternoon, there was a soft knock at the door. When I turned, Rachel was standing there, holding a box. She looked different. Her eyes were tired but clear, her expression humble. "Can I come in?" she asked. Of course. She placed the box on the table and opened it. Inside were embroidery pieces I thought were gone forever, old designs I'd made years ago, ones she'd taken during the worst of our silence. "I kept them," she said quietly. "I don't know why. Maybe I wasn't ready to let go." My throat tightened. "I'm starting therapy," she continued. "Real therapy, not just couples counseling. I'm taking a sabbatical from design. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be better than everyone." I swallowed hard. "I'm proud of you, Rachel." She smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I saw your new collection. It's extraordinary." She hesitated, then added softly, "Would you? Would you teach me? Real embroidery, not the digital kind. I want to learn the traditional way." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My chest ached with emotion too deep for words. "I'd love that," I said finally. She exhaled, relief flickering across her face, and when she left, she looked lighter. After she was gone, I turned back to the piece I was working, and a garden scene with a woman standing in the center, arms lifted, surrounded by light. I threaded my needle, letting the rhythm of each stitch calm me. My phone buzzed again, another opportunity, another request, another life-changing offer, but I ignored it for now. In that quiet room, with afternoon sunlight spilling through the window and catching the silver in my hair, I realized something that had taken 67 years to learn. I didn't need fame, validation, or applause. I just needed to believe that my hands, my heart, and my art were enough. Every stitch I made was an act of faith, a small declaration that beauty still mattered, that kindness still had power, and that it was never too late to start again. As I finished the final petal of the embroidered flower, I whispered the same words that had carried me through everything. Keep creating, keep believing, keep rising. And if my story has touched you, if you've ever felt too small, too old, or too invisible to begin again, then this is my invitation. Subscribe, stay with me, and let's keep stitching new beginnings together, one thread at a time.